This is the machine that beat the doctors and never treated a single patient. It lived in a basement at Stanford. It spoke through a keyboard. And everything it knew fit inside a few hundred rules. In 1972, it made a promise. One the whole field would rise on, then break. This is Chapter 2, The Doctor in a Box. Here's the plan. By the end, you'll know what AI actually was before machines learn from data. How you build a doctor out of typed instructions. Why it worked. Why it was never put into clinical use. And why this kind of intelligence never really disappeared. It's the early 70s, and a hospital at 3 in the morning is a dangerous place to have a rare infection. The specialist who can identify it may be asleep, or at another hospital, or one of only a handful of people with the right expertise. And the paging can't wait. A graduate student named Ted Shortliff, training as a physician himself, has a strange idea. If the expert can't be at the bedside, maybe the expert's knowledge can. The idea had a precedent. Down the hall at Stanford, a program called DENDRAL had spent years working out the structure of molecules from raw data. The first of its kind. Shortliff's leap was to aim that same trick at a doctor. So he sits with infection specialists and asks over and over, "How do you know?" Then he types what they say as rules. If the stain is negative, and the shape is a rod, and it grows without oxygen, then it's probably bacteroides. One rule, then another. Interview by interview, the pile grows. They even teach it to hedge. Each rule carries a number for how sure it is, so the box can say probably, the way doctors do. A few hundred rules later, the basement machine can question someone about a patient it will never see. Question by question, like a resident on rounds, then recommend a treatment. It asks its questions in plain English, and it can explain itself. Type Y, and it tells you which rule it's following. In 1975, that felt like meeting the future. By the end of the decade, they put it to the test. Real past cases. The machine's recommendations beside the humans, residents and Stanford infection specialists, judged by outside experts who didn't know which answers came from the computer. The machine performed at the level of the specialists, and when the results were published, its recommendations earned the top rating, above the human doctors. The box worked. And then, nothing. No hospital rolled it out for routine patient care. No patient ever met it as their doctor. The artificial expert stayed largely where it began, a research system. Partly it was plumbing. Using it meant sitting at a terminal for a long consultation. In the 1970s, hospital wards weren't filled with networked computers. Partly it was trust. If the box recommends the wrong drug, who is responsible? The doctor? The hospital? The people who wrote the rule? Nobody had a good answer. But by then, the idea had escaped the basement. Because if typed rules could hold part of a doctor's expertise, why not a geologist? A chemist? An engineer? A banker? By the early 80s, systems built on the same idea were configuring computers, interpreting scientific data, and helping companies make decisions. One of them, called XCon, configured every computer digital equipment shipped, and was said to save the company tens of millions of dollars a year. Rules had become a business. AI had found something it had never really had before. An industry. The Stanford machine had a name, MYCIN. It was a play on the names of antibiotics, streptomycin, erythromycin. Drugs named after myx, the Greek word for fungus, which makes the first artificial doctor, in effect, named after mold. A small name for a big idea. Take the knowledge inside an expert's head, write it down, and put it inside a machine. Now, the words. What Shortliff made has a name. An expert system, a machine that holds and applies expertise in one narrow domain. Getting that knowledge out of experts and into the machine, knowledge engineering. The pile of facts and rules, the knowledge base. The part that searches those rules and chains them toward a conclusion, the inference engine. MYCIN's numbers for, probably. Certainty factors. And the ability to answer why. An explanation facility. The machine could show the reasoning that led to its answer. Now place MYCIN on the map from Chapter 1. The ability, deciding. The task, diagnosing infections and recommending treatment. The method, rules, written by humans. One glowing cell. But look closely at what's happening. A doctor learns. The doctor explains. A human turns that explanation into a rule, and the machine follows it. The machine itself learns nothing. Show MYCIN another patient, then another, then 1,000 more. Its rules do not change. If the system needs rule 501, a human still has to type it. That was the bargain. The machine could use knowledge incredibly fast. But first, someone had to put the knowledge in. And every one of those rules got there the same way. A human sat with an expert, pulled the knowledge out by hand, and typed it in. The machine never added one itself. And that idea never disappeared. Whenever a system says, if this condition is true and that condition is true, then do this, you're looking at the same basic idea. Eligibility checks, compliance rules, tax software, workflow approvals, a thermostat following a schedule. Different worlds, same basic machinery, knowledge written down, then executed. Even modern AI systems often have rules wrapped around them, deciding what they're allowed to do, when they should stop, or when a human needs to step in. Expert systems didn't become the future, but rules never left it. MYCIN worked for one reason. Enough of its narrow world could be written down as rules. But try to capture more complicated expertise, and something strange happens. You sit with the expert. You ask, how do you know? At first, the rules come. If this, then that. So you keep asking, and eventually they stop. The expert still knows what to do. They just can't fully explain how they know. A radiologist sees something wrong before they can describe exactly what gave it away. A mechanic hears an engine and says, that doesn't sound right. Years of experience compressed into an intuition they can't turn into a neat list of instructions. The knowledge is there, but it refuses to become a rule. And every rule that did make it in came the same slow way. One expert, one engineer, one interview at a time. 10 rules cost a week. 1,000 rules cost years. The bigger the ambition, the worse the math. And once companies tried to build bigger and bigger expert systems, that became a serious problem. It had a name, and it was only one of the cracks beginning to spread through the first AI industry. Soon, the promises would outrun the machines, and the money would disappear. That's the story next. The flaw with a name. The industry built on rules, and the moment the first great AI boom turned into winter. Chapter 3, The Winter. Leave the lamp on.